And all right, slowly loading. Let me know what you guys can see. All right, can you see the first slide? Okay, all righty. There's just there you go. So we've kind of already talked about our purpose of the training and why we wanted to do this. You know, first and foremost, obviously, to learn from what we've been doing so far, but also just to learn from each other, learn what you guys have been doing, and learn some best practices. And some of you may be doing things different ways that are working really, really well, and therefore you could learn from each other. And so we thought that that would be beneficial. Obviously, also the way that we're doing the monitoring, doing it month to month this way, we're trying to prevent those large paybacks at the end of the year. So by catching all the mistakes early on and training on them, we're hoping that that happens. And we know this is a new program, and so you know, we're all learning together. And so the monitoring in general was never set up in a way to really have that, like, you know, get you attitude. We really wanted it to be a learning process and to make sure that we can help you the best way possible. Again, because we want this to be a good program. We want this program to become permanent. We don't want it to be a temporary program. So the only way that we can do that is to show the feds that is a program that works, a program that's necessary. So in doing things like this and this monitoring, and really getting the money out the door and not having big paybacks, that's a way that we can do that. So I'm gonna kind of turn it over to Leah, and first we'll talk about, maybe if it'll let me, the different unallowable charges. Most of these you know, but as I said, we've come across a ton of different names for things. So we thought we'd go through both unallowable and allowable charges and the different names that we've seen for them. So go right ahead, Leah.
Okay, so with this first slide, I would just, like she said, it's just terms that I've seen on the bills as unallowable charges. If you do happen to know a different term that a vendor uses, you can send that my way and I can put that on this list. However, the one thing I will say with this is that if you run across a charge on a bill and it's something other than these or other than the allowable charges, if you go to the vendor's website, you can find a possible list or charge updates on what they do. That's how I've been able to find most of these. So yeah, that's pretty much cut and dry with the unallowable charges. If you have any questions on these though, you can ask me. But yeah, that's pretty much it for these.
Is anyone seeing anything other than these? I mean, trash, obviously we're seeing sanitation, solid waste, the extra bin charge, obviously for any of the extra trash cans that people get, stormwater, street maintenance. We haven't seen that too often, but tends to be like the street cleaning fees that they have. Clean air fee I've seen, insurance is a lot. Different repairs, infrastructure fees, obviously well water and septic. Any other popular ones you guys have seen that we could add to the list? Let's see, I see a hand raised, but I can't see who it is. Rosa.
Hi. Under their sanitation, I spoke to one of the water vendors and they considered that part of water. So I've been adding it into all my water.
So some places I've noticed will use different terms for their charges. I don't remember which vendor it was, but somebody did use sanitation as a term for sewer. But I just hope that when you guys run across a bill like that and you are made aware that that is what they're doing, that we can just note it. And I obviously wouldn't mark that incorrect on the water monitoring. I can't remember which vendor it was, but I did notice that on one of them, and I just marked that in the notes for monitoring that that specific vendor has it listed that way. But I would
Okay.
say that most vendors are considering sanitation as trash. So you just got
Okay.
to be careful.
Okay. Let me clarify this. And this may sound silly, but I'm going to ask you this. Is sanitation and sanitary the same?
It should be. So again, that's where I say be careful with your vendor. So sanitary charges and solid waste usually have to do with the trash.
Okay.
But
Be-
yeah.
Just because there's specifically says sanitary and garbage
Okay.
on their
Yeah.
bill.
Yeah. So sanitary and garbage, I would put those together as an unallowable charge. But if they tell you different, you would just note it. Like if you say they told me sanitary is their water, but they do group them with the water bill. So it just, you'd have to
Yeah.
show me which vendor it is and I can help you.
Okay.
And that's where it, becomes a little difficult. We're not going to ask you to argue with the vendor whatsoever. We're not going to wait. Not going to make you waste your time, your valuable time to do that. So as long as, you have, especially, you're telling us you made that contact with them and they're saying this is a part of the water. It is something that, is not specific to the trash portion. It has to do with their water, them having clean, drinkable water. Then we're not going to question that. And as long as you put it in the notes to document so that us or our federal entities can see that, that's fine. And that's a big part in what we have here that Leah's really requesting is, that good communication between us and you in the notes section. Make sure you're documenting those types of conversations. They're not always conversations that have to be had. You don't have to always talk to the vendor, but if you do talk to the vendor, make sure you're documenting it, even if it seems like a conversation that seems made up, just like that. Like, to me, I would be like, what? Sanitation is trash. That doesn't make sense. But I trust you and I trust what you say. So as long as that's documented, then, we will be fine with that.
Okay. So all the ones that we've did for this particular vendor and applied funds already, do we need to go back and put that note in there?
I would just put the note in moving forward, and then I
Okay.
can put on my end that was what was told. Because like if you tell me like moving forward that a vendor said so and so thing, I'm not going into every file and making you need to write that the vendor said that. I just know from my own notes. So I want you to tell me like
Oh,
that's what they told you. Because
okay.
like your intake knows, but I don't know. And I'm looking at 21 different agencies that may have sanitation listed as something completely different. So I just want to know. So I'm not marking you wrong and asking you to pay it back.
Okay. Thank you.
Samantha?
On the Indiana American Water bills, they have other charges and it's distribution system improvement. Is that an allowable one?
Yeah, go ahead, Leah.
I've been looking at Indiana American Water, and because they don't have any specific unallowable charges and their bills don't deal with any unallowable things, I don't think the charge is that high, if I remember. How much is it if you're looking at one right now?
$1.60.
Yeah, so I would just take it.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's what I was going to say. I was going to say, especially on the ones that they are only, and I hate this for those that deal with multiple things in into the bills. But on the ones that are solely water and they don't deal with any other things like trash or any solid waste or not solid waste, stormwater or anything like that, and you know that for the most part there's no like insurance or repairs and things in there, just go ahead and pay that full bill. If it's one that it's all water, check that box and move on, because there's so few that you can do that with. The more you can do that, the more we want you to, because like I said, that's so few and far between for you guys. But yeah, that's fine.
Thank you.
Right. Rosa, did you have another question, or is your hand just still up from the last one? Thank you. Oh, no. It's up again. Down again. All right. Okay. So did anybody else have any unallowable charges to add to the list that that you don't see up here, or different verbiage that you've seen for any of these? Because these are lists that we plan to get out in just in a Word document format that you can pass along to your staff and your intake workers so that they can, keep it on them and just have it at the ready so that they can use it during their assessments. Okay. All right, so let's move on to the allowable charges. Obviously not as large of a list, but same thing. I don't know, Leah, if you really want to talk about this one. I guess it's kind of self-explanatory.
It is, but I think the big point to put on here is that I got a lot of questions about fire hydrant, fire protection, and hydrant charges. So that the hydrant charge was something that we were told that we can take as an allowable charge, and fire protection is something that I lump in as a hydrant charge because the only way we can protect a fire is through the hydrant. So that to make it easier on everybody, I just thought that it would just be better to just consider those the same thing. So I don't know if it confused a bunch of people on monitoring, but that is why I allowed that charge. So
correct. That one is definitely one that I have seen more variations of than anything. Is that fire hydrant flush fee, fire hydrant protection, hydrant charge. Laura Grove, did you have a question or a comment? No, just unmuted. Okay. But yeah, so anything to do with the fire hydrant, don't even worry about asking us. If it's some variation of that, you can send it our way so we can add it to the list. But if it's any type of variation of the fire hydrant fee, you can pay it, which I think we've discussed several times now, but it does get confusing because it may not look exactly like that very first one we talked about, which I think it was labeled fire hydrant flush fee. But are you guys seeing anything else that we've deemed allowable or that you think should be on this list? Going once, going twice. Okay. All right. Well, if you think of anything or as you come upon things for either of those, please let us know and we'll get them added to the list, and we can always update and send out as needed to everyone so that you guys can utilize that as a resource for yourself and your staff. All right, late fees. These are probably going to be a little hard to see, but like I said, we'll be sending these out, and Leah can also send out the documents themselves so that you can actually see them a bit better. But I wanted to at least put some documents up on the screen as she was discussing these. So go right ahead, Leah.
Okay, I got a couple questions about the late fees because late fees are considered an allowable charge. However, sometimes the late fees are added in the current charge. So my initial thought was I didn't want you guys to have to do a bunch of extra work to try and figure out this calculation. However, you can add it. So if that is something that you decide to do, I just ask that you stay consistent. So the examples that I put in here, if you look at the citizens bill, the 127.96 does not include that late payment charge. So if that was something that you guys were doing, I just wanted you to know that that is okay to do, but you also don't have to. I don't know how to really say, like, it's what you decide, and if you do it, stay consistent. With the second bill that's in the middle, the penalties are already included in that balance. So you don't have to add anything. You just look at the 152.89. And then as far as that third one that pops up, the penalty on the past due amount is spread out. So it's not added within that past due amount or that current charge until the bottom of the bill. So if you consider it a current charge, consider it a current charge and you leave it alone and you only take that 237.56. Or you add the 1857 to the 237.56, which can all be calculated within the calculation tool. It's just these fees are starting to pop up a lot more in my monitoring, and it looks like you guys do it for some but not for others. So I just ask that if you have a question on them, you reach out to me so we can kind of figure out how to keep these consistent. Because if you want to take them, you can, but you need to calculate it correctly. Does that make sense? Is there any questions? Rosa?
So you're saying that if we're okay with not adding the late fee, even though that is an allowable charge?
So it is an allowable charge, but on some bills, it's already calculated, which like that picture in the middle, and then other bills, it's separated and almost added into the current charge. So technically it's a current charge.
Okay.
So while it's allowable, it's still like, it's kind of, like I said, you either do it and do it consistently for every single one, or you just leave it alone. And like for that citizens bill, you would only do, obviously you calculate out the gas, but you would only pay attention to the 127.96. Or in the third picture, you'd only pay attention to the 237.56. Like, it's just, I'm seeing a lot of back and forth. Some of you take it, some of you don't. So it's either just one or the other with the vendor. Like, I either have to mark it wrong or I have to like ask you to add it. So whichever you pick to do. I know it's difficult, but it's just all bills are different in their late charges.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
It does. It's just going to be hard to.
If you've been doing
Try.
it without it, I'm not asking you to take it. I'm saying if you guys have been consistently adding a late charge, I'm not telling you that you don't have to do it anymore. I'm just saying to pay attention.
Okay.
So like if you were to look at that third bill and only look at the total amount past due of 237.56 and say that's what I'm taking, then I accept that. But if you're going to add that 1857 late charge, I need you to remember that this bill doesn't include it into the previous balance. Like, so that, like, that penalty is not added in there yet. So
Okay.
you have to pay attention to it if you're going to take it.
Okay.
Okay. So.
Yeah, it's very interesting how many different ways a water bill can be. I mean, I'm sure you all are already used to it in the energy and gas world and everything, but it's just kind of astounding to me that there are so many different ways to say the same thing and to do the same thing. But it does only make sense to me to pay the late fee because that late fee will likely need to be paid for them to be turned back on. But if that's the case, then I don't know why they wouldn't. Well, I guess then that makes sense why they wouldn't have it in the past due balance because that part's not past due yet.
That's where the confusion comes into place. But I think the one thing that I'm seeing is that sometimes when the bills are getting looked at, they're getting like overthought. So let's go back to this middle picture here of the bill. At the very bottom, it says after the due date, and that amount is about $6.30 above the balance due. So that $6, that's a fee, but you don't have to worry about that. And I've seen somebody look at that amount because you guys are doing the bills after the due date. But we have to look at the bill as if we were looking at that bill before the due date. Like, we have to go back in time and say, like, this is the bill that we're paying. We can't think about that after the due date balance. Plus, we're not even supposed to look at that balance, but I've just seen it happen. So I just want you to know.
And remain consistent.
Right. So.
And I think that was probably my most concerning, and we will go over it in another slide, but I think that was probably the most concerning thing to me that came out of monitoring, was the fact that several LSPs were calling and getting the current bill amount when I thought it was made pretty clear that we were to be always taking the bill that was submitted at time of application. So if that was not made aware at the beginning, or even through your monitoring, please understand that that is what is to be taking place. When you are doing the benefit, the amount that can be awarded is whatever they submitted with the bill. Yes, even if it is 3 months prior to the application date, because at some point we are going to be caught up. And I wish that.
No, I think that, sorry, I think the
No,
question.
Lisa just asked the question about even if it was 3 months ago. So she's asking if they were assessing it, you know, a bill application that was 3 months ago.
No, I'm saying if the application date is today and the bill is from 3 months ago, they just didn't put the most current bill. Should we be getting the bill that goes with the application?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yes, I'm sorry. Thank you. I apologize. Yeah, whatever they are, whatever the bill is at the time of application. Yeah, I apologize, Lisa. Yes. So I thought you were saying if they applied in October, but you're not doing it until now. But yeah, if they apply today, but they give you a October bill, then you need to ask for today's bill. And vice versa. If they applied in October, but they didn't give a bill at that time, and they try to give you March's bill, you need to contact the vendor and get October's bill, you know, or whatever. And the main reason being because if we didn't do it that way, then they could have applied in November, then stop paying their bill completely, and now be hundreds and hundreds of dollars more behind. And not that we don't want that money to go out, but that's just not fair to those that did what they were supposed to, you know, submitted the bill at time of application and then continued to pay on their account like they were supposed to. Because I think what a lot of them aren't understanding, or I'm not sure why it's not getting, either they're just not wanting to understand, or if they just truly aren't understanding that this is a one-time benefit only. And they're, no matter what, even if they applied in November and we paid the bill for November and December, that's still an only time we're paying it. We couldn't continue to pay on their bills forever. And they stop paying and they don't continue to pay, and then they get behind again and they're shut off pretty quickly again. And our vendors are really struggling with that, because they're worried that they're not following the guidelines set forth in the MOA. And so I'm getting a lot of phone calls, you know, kind of how you all are worried about them, you know, applying in November, but we're just now paying the bill. You know, they're worried too, because they're saying, I'm just now getting the bill, you know, their payment due that was from November, but even if I let this take care of their account, they're already behind again and I need to shut them off again. Am I even allowed to do that? And technically, yeah, they are. And so that's kind of unfortunate in general. But I think, going into this next program year, we're really going to be valuing, I mean, not that we didn't already, but we're really going to sit down between the LSPs. We'll have our own kind of little round table and discuss what we think we could do to get more money out the door to help people more. And then do the same thing with the vendors. What can we do that would make more sense? And is it going to be more of a matrix? And what can we do that still fits in the confines of what the feds have told us we can do, but helps the most people? And that's what we want to do. Stacy, you have a question?
Yes, I want to know when clients are reapplying, are they allowed to apply for water at that time again? Like,
Yeah.
so their first file was denied, so when they come back and reapply, they can't apply for water the second time.
When they are reapplying in the next program year?
No, like this year. So their first application was denied because it was incomplete or whatever. And so now they're reapplying again, but they're asking for water. Even if they asked for water the first time, are we allowed to go back and are they allowed to apply for water if they were denied the first time?
No.
That's what I thought. Okay, I just wanted to make sure because we're having lots of people reapply now. So I was just really wanting to make sure. Thank you.
Yeah. They can reapply with the next program year, just like they do with EAP. Julie.
Sorry. Hey, so I thought why can't you reapply when you're reapplying for the program? Why can't you also apply for water then?
You can reapply next program year, but
No, but I mean now, like, you're allowed to reapply for EAP if you were denied because of an incomplete file or you were over income. I thought that we could also consider LIWAP at that time too, as it's again at time of application. Reapplication.
I'm probably misunderstanding that situation. Tom is looking at the screen, so I can tell he can help me. Tom, because I think I'm misunderstanding that type of scenario.
So if I'm understanding the question correctly, it's a case where, and I'm kind of half listening as I'm reviewing this, so please bear with me. But if I'm understanding the question correctly, it's someone who applied, was denied, and is reapplying for EAP and also wanting to include water, correct?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So to me, I mean, that sounds like that would be a distinct application from that first application. And so I think that following the logic of the program rules, it probably would be okay for them to put in that reapplication for water along with the reapplication for EAP.
Okay.
If it's a case where they were approved for EAP, but a water benefit was deferred because they didn't qualify for the benefit at the time of application, I think that's a completely different story.
Right. Okay.
But if it's a full reapplication, I think that does make sense to allow for the reapplication for water at that time as well. Or if they only applied for EAP the first time, got denied, but now they're reapplying for EAP, but they're also adding water, I think that's a reasonable allowance as well.
Okay.
And I have to say, like, clients have no clue what the rules of this brand new program are. I mean,
Right.
They barely know, and we've been trained on it. So it's not like they're thinking to themselves, oh, I'm going to let my water go so that I can get a whole big benefit. It's not like that. And, also there's the misunderstanding because, again, why would they know? I've had some clients assume because they've been on EAP for years that now their water account is under moratorium. So another problem, it's getting getting them to be knowledgeable about the program now that they know we have it, so that we can all proceed accordingly or whatever.
Yeah, no, you're right. And I guess I was misunderstanding too, because I'm still kind of learning EAP as well, as I'm going along with reasons why, they would be denied. So I guess in my mind, I'm thinking they were denied for a specific reason, like, income or, you know, something like that for a specific reason to where it wouldn't be, they wouldn't have a reason to reapply, but that makes sense if they just miss the 55-day or incomplete and then are reapplying. So yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, and the moratorium with the water, that has been a struggle too. Getting them to understand that it doesn't apply to water because, you know, and what the reasoning for a moratorium even is and why that occurs. I mean, you know, just to even be honest, before I started working here, I didn't know what a moratorium is. So it is hard to expect even the lay person to understand why we have that or what it even means. So yeah, no, that totally, I totally understand your point, Julie. Okay. All right. Any other questions on the late fees before we move on to the next one? Next slide. Okay. All right. All right. So here we're talking about the status, and this hopefully will start. This discussion will also hopefully help when you're coming back to those that have the vendor not entered in yet, to hopefully help you start processing those apps as well. Yeah.
Okay, so I just see a lot of applications where where the application is set to approved, but there's no claims. So I definitely understand like not knowing that the option was there to put the non-participating vendor. I'm just more worried that it's going to be harder to find those applications, which I've been able to pull the report and find them. So it's just more of getting into the habit of, you know, keeping track of that status of the water applications so that it's easier to find them. So it was just something I wanted to mention so that you guys know if it's incomplete because of a water bill not being in the file, you know, mark that as incomplete. So maybe you guys can, you know, follow up before it gets denied. But putting it as approved when there's no claims on there can be misleading, especially for my reports, because I'm pulling up applications that don't actually have any claims. So, yep, that was just the short note of that. It was just something I noticed on pretty much every agency application.
Any questions or comments on that? Okay. All right, and as we get, you know, further into the year, obviously we still do have plenty of vendors that aren't participating yet, so still continue to send those our way. We're doing our best. Emily has been kicking butt trying to get those vendors on board, and you know, she's contacted several of the vendors you sent us multiple times. So please know that at this point, I would say if there's a vendor not participating, it's not for lack of trying several times at this stage. So, you know, some communication on your end could help as well. Or, you know, maybe some extra details like how many applicants have those individuals listed so far. So we could say, well, if you did come on board, we already have 20 applicants that have you listed as their vendor. So that's 20 applicants that you would be receiving payments on. You know, little details like that could help us. And I know that might be easier said than done for you guys, but and that's something we could probably help with. Leah can pull that type of information, or Emily can too. You know, that's stuff that we could help with and hopefully move them along. But I know there's been a few vendors that I've said that to, that has, you know, kind of blew their mind. They're like, what? We already had that many people? It was almost like they were kind of in shock that many their customers were being that proactive about getting help. So I think things like that can maybe help us move along. But Emily keeps a fantastic spreadsheet of all the communication she has with them, the dates she contacts them, the outcomes. So if there's any information you ever need like that, let us know. I know I've sent several of you that type of information before, just to make sure you guys know that we're staying on top of it, and really trying to get these vendors on board. So keep at it. All right, and here's some more information on that same topic, for the vendor issues, but I'll let Leah continue on with this one.
Okay, so a big thing in the monitoring that I sent over was that everyone received a non-participating vendor Excel sheet. So in that Excel sheet, there is a full list of every single application that has a non-participating vendor, and then the second tab has all of the vendors that are listed as other MP. So that all list has every single one of them, but we pulled out the others so that you knew that there were applications that are not ever going to have like a drop off of that MP. So most of them have a vendor that just has an MP status on the end of it. Once it becomes active, you're going to notice that. But with the other is never going to have that MP drop off. So it's always going to list that unless you guys know how to go back in and see them. So I thought that maybe sending them over would just be easier for you to keep track of them. So they're all in a list. However, I did notice this week that if the vendor is not in the drop down at all, then you guys have no other options other than to click other MP. So we came up with a possible fix for that, and that is to create a vendor in the database for your drop downs that would say, I think it was Town of Darlington. Town of Darlington is a municipality, but their water and wastewater is not active because they don't have an MOA. But if we put Darlington water in the system, you could use it as a drop down in water and wastewater, and then once it becomes active, I'll pull a report for you and I will send you the ones that have that as the drop down, so that it's better than putting other MP. So there's going to be other ones that you guys run into, so I'm asking that you send those to us so that we can create that placeholder vendor so that we have an easier way to run the report, so that you're not going through 500 other MP files trying to figure out what vendor they belong to. So, but just going back to monitoring, the dwelling page does have to have something in the water and wastewater, so I know why it either doesn't have a claim or why it does have a claim. Like it needs to match up. So sometimes I'm seeing it blank, sometimes I'm seeing other MP. So we're just trying to fix that so it's easier to monitor.
Yes, Linda, that's correct. Yes, that was the fix. Other NP was the fix. And so like as Leah just said, today literally is the time that we came up with this new fix. So
the only issue is you guys can use other, but it's gonna, when I pulled the reports for you guys, it came up that there was somebody that had, I want to say upwards of 600 files that had, you know, a non-participating vendor on it with upwards of 200 of them with other MP, and you have to go in and manually look at every single one of those to change those to an active vendor once the vendor becomes active. And if they say other MP, you'll never know what vendor it is until you click on it. Does that make sense? Because there's no report to run to see what vendor is listed on the application unless there's a claim in it, or unless the vendor page or the dwelling page has that information. And if it says other, then there's none of that. So you are either not able to find it, or you just have a bunch of files falling through the cracks. So this way, you know, maybe we put it as this Darlington water or whatever vendor it is with, it's always going to remain non-participating because it's not technically active. And then once your vendor becomes active, I would just run a report and say, hey, all of the ones that have this placeholder vendor, I need you to go and switch it over to the vendor that's active. And that might be easier than saying, hey, go look through all 200 of these other MP files and hope that you catch every single one of them in there that happen to have this one active vendor versus your 17 unactive ones.
So Julie asked, what if we don't know who their vendor is, or they have well water and or a septic tank? Should we just leave it blank?
I would think that the well water and septic can stay blank, but if you don't know who it is, that would make sense to stay blank. But once you do know, this is more if you know who the vendor is and it's not within that drop down.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Because if you don't know, it's just an incomplete file, and the status would help you find that once they submitted it, right?
Yeah, and just keep in mind too, the bad part about some of this is what you all see, and I'm sure Tom said this to you plenty, but what you all see and what we see are two totally different things. So that kind of sometimes makes it very difficult for us to kind of imagine how to tell you what to do, because we don't exactly see what you see. So I know that there'll be probably times where we'll ask kind of you to be a guinea pig or something for us to help us out to figure out what we need to tell you guys to make sense, because we just don't, our pages in EAP Connect just don't look the same as yours. So yeah, this particular situation that we're describing is if you know the vendor, but they're not participating yet, and the vendor is not on the drop-down list. Or they, yeah, so they, yeah, it wouldn't be on the drop-down list. So for the example today, the town of Darlington that was brought to us, they were in the system, but they were only signed on as a EAP vendor. So there was no selection for her to choose. So she was asking, can you please put it in so I can choose them? And previously we were saying no, because we didn't have enough time for Emily, and when it was just Emily and I, to go in and create files, I guess profiles for vendors that we weren't sure were even going to come on as vendors. It also, and not a lot, but it costs money for every single file that we have in EAP Connect for rowing to hold in the database. It also costs money. So we didn't want to build a bunch of files in there that weren't actually going to be used for anything. But at this point, we have more time, and we also know that we are going to be going in and having them delete a bunch of files. So neither one of those is really a concern. And also the benefit far outweighs any of the downfalls at this point. So this specific scenario is only if you know who the vendor is, but they are not available in the drop down. So not only will you bringing them to our attention have us create the file for you to be able to choose as a placeholder, it will also ensure that we're in contact with them to bring them on board with an MOA as well. And then Linda says, do we need to go back and change them? Well, they'll all have to be changed if you are going to give them a benefit. Yeah.
I will say that that is the issue with the other MP being an option, is that because they say other MP, they still pull up on my report. It does not tell me if the application is denied or approved regardless. So it ultimately is going to be a bunch of files that have to go back in and be changed, because we have to be able to see who the benefit was denied for. Like I can't see anything right now if it says other MP, other than pulling a report that just generally says you have this many, and I have to individually go into every single application. So I'm trying to just come up with an easier way so that come September, we don't have thousands of them.
And I know that internally we've been discussing some ways that we can help. So this is probably going to be another discussion that we pick up internally and see if there's something we can do to go in. I don't have my notes here from that discussion, but I know I talked with Emily Kay about utilizing resources to take care of these, because there are so many of them, and it makes it look like there are way more incomplete files than there really are. Because of that, because there's either the vendor, because there's no vendor, or whatever it may be. So I think that's a discussion we'll have to continue to have offline and internally as well. And obviously we would continue to keep you updated on whatever we choose to do to help you out. Whether that's going in and, you know, looking at the bills that's attached to the file and, you know, picking the correct vendor, or creating a profile for the vendor and changing it to that. That was something that we talked about. So I know it's definitely something that Emily Kay thinks would be beneficial for us to help with, and I think we agreed with that as well.
I also want to mention that if you can make a determination on the water bill, then regardless of the non-participating status, you should make that determination. So because we don't use the funds as crisis, and you look at the bill that's on hand, if that bill does not have a past due balance, you can deny it regardless of whether the vendor is participating or not, which I've only seen a couple agencies that are doing that. So you don't have to wait for the vendor to become active before you go in and make that determination. You could also put a note in there after you make the determination of this amount needs to be added once this vendor is participating, but I just wouldn't mark the vendor or mark the status as approved if it's not approved yet. And that goes back to all of this.
Okay, Micah said, once I've known some of my vendors have come aboard, I've had to go back to the dwelling tab and save the vendor again, and for the claim or benefit to be added to the claims tab and approval letter. So that's just something to take note of. Makes sense. To activate that. All right. Any questions or comments before we move on? No? Okay. All right, vendor communication. We've touched some on this already, but wanted to really hit on this one because this kind of also goes along with the notes and really documenting what communications you're having. But yeah, I'll let Leah talk about this one too.
So within my monitoring, I noticed that I was pulling up some bills that would have a previous balance of about, let's say, $130. But then there'd be a note in the database that said, called the vendor, and the vendor said that water and gas are so-and-so amounts, and they add up to $160. So whatever questions are being asked to the vendor may not be communicated well with them to where they're answering what you are needing. Because if I were told, oh yeah, the past due balance is 160, but the bill I'm looking at says 130, I think I might ask them another question as to what it is that they're trying to add in there, or what it is that they're not adding. Like, something is going on because those amounts aren't making sense. And then the other thing is I've noticed that if you just call the vendor, they'll just try to give you outright the past due balance, whether it's from March, February, and you're working on a bill in November. So my suggestion is that you come up with one question or a couple of questions that you know that the only answer that they can give you is going to reflect from that bill that you're looking at. So can you give me this amount and this amount of this bill from bill date so-and-so? Because if not, they're just going to try to give you a 30 days past due balance, and you have no idea from when they're pulling that from. And I don't necessarily I'm not sending you guys paybacks because the vendor is telling you incorrectly, but I do want to make you aware that if I see it consistently, I'm letting you know that, hey, the vendor may not be understanding what you're asking. So, you know, like these amounts don't add up. Like they're basically, in my mind, there's no way that the balance that they should give you should be higher than the previous balance on the bill you're looking at. And that's just what I've noticed.
Okay, so yeah, so you can see the example question that we put there, very straightforward. Can I please get the balance on client X? So you put the name there as of and the date, and that date should be the date of the application. And I underlined it, bolded it. LIWAP funds are not used as crisis. We do not have crisis for a LIWAP, unfortunately. Therefore, you have to stay consistent and use the bill at the time of application. Okay, that's the most important thing. So that was probably the most concerning thing for me was the variation away from using bills at whenever you're calling versus the time of application. Right. Any questions or comments about the vendor communication? Just document, document, document. It's what those notes sections are for, and you know, use that, and Leah will be very, very happy with that. No?
And I will say that most agencies, you guys are doing really well at these water determinations. It's just there's sometimes there's a slip with intake, maybe overlooking it. You know, sometimes they just happen to just put down what the vendor says, and all I'm asking is that they just are getting amounts that make sense to that bill that they're looking at. So I'm not trying to ask for you guys to do extra work or call. You don't have to call the vendor if you don't have to. I just want to make sure that whatever you're asking is they're giving you the correct information.
My dog is barking at me, so I'm going to switch to the next slide, and I'm going to let him go outside so he won't bark at me while Leah goes to the next one. Here we go. There you go, Leah. All of your favorite parts. And I hope you guys are getting benefit out of this tool because I think Leah did an excellent job.
Okay, so really the reason why this slide is up here is just so that I can let you guys know that you don't have to use this if you don't feel like it is beneficial. If you see a bill and the bill doesn't have any unallowable charges on it, you do not have to use the tool unless you are just using it to document, then that is fine. I just don't want you to overthink some of the bills because fire hydrant, tax, water, wastewater, those are allowable. So if that's all that's on the bill, you just have to take that previous charge. Like I said, the bottom of the page can be used for documentation purposes if that's what you're wanting to use instead of just doing the calculation. But the tool is really good for really big balances, a bunch of unallowable charges or payment plans. So I just wanted to really use this as the last slide if there was any questions or if you guys are running into any issues with the calculation tool. But also just wanted to let you know that it is not something that you have to have on every single file. I'm not expecting that. I just wanted something that would make these water benefits easier to calculate without you having to jump through hoops talking to a vendor. So if you have any questions on it, I would be happy to walk through one or talk about it. Doesn't, Rosa?
I just want to comment that I really like that worksheet. It had helped me and my staff a whole lot. I usually just use the top portion and we do all the breakdown.
Okay.
But I have run into a transmittal where I sent before this worksheet, so I'm having to go back through all those and redetermine eligibility based on the worksheet because the vendor could not provide me a bill or an update like you mentioned in the slide
Mhm.
previous.
Okay.
So I'm running into having to do that worksheet.
Okay.
Can you go over that bottom part of that page? I really like the top part, but I'm not sure how to actually use that second portion of that worksheet.
Okay. So do you need me to share it on the screen?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Let me get out. I think I have to stop
Okay.
presenting so you can. All right, there you go.
Alrighty. Let me see. Okay, can everybody see?
Yeah, I would just maybe zoom in just a little.
Okay, 1 second. I gotta move my, there we go. Oops.
That's good.
Probably too much. There we
Yeah.
go. Good. Okay, so the bottom half of the tool I made so that if, you know, the calculation just wasn't something that you wanted to do and you were used to calling the vendor, then you could use this. So really, it's just if you called the vendor and they were like, yeah, I can tell you this, but I can't tell you this, then that's what these two sections are for. So let's say I call and Jill says, yeah, it looks like in our records they haven't paid the bill in 4 months. So I would, you know, put 4 months in here. And then I would say, okay, well, do you have any unallowable charges that you have on your bill? Because this is, again, I'm calling because they don't have a breakdown for me. And she says, yeah, we have trash and our standard rate is $5.25. And I'd be like, okay. And so that past due balance that I see on the bill without the breakdown is $256. Then I know that the calculation is going to tell me that I can pay $235 if, based on what she is telling me, that there's only $5.25 of trash for 4 months. So, but you could also just write it all down, write that note in here that Jill stated that the bill was only 4 months old with a standard with a trash charge of $5.25. And that way I know, you know, what she told you. And then the other one would be if she was like, I can't tell you how long it's past due, but I can tell you how much it was past due on this date. Then you would just ask her what those benefits are, and she's going to tell you $56.25 for water, $85.50 for wastewater. And then I'm going to ask, is there any taxes? Is there any late fees that you added on that? She's like, oh yeah, for the last bill that was on there, there was $6 of late fees. And then I'm going to write all of that in the notes section, and then that's what I get. So these amounts aren't always going to probably be the same. This is just for vendors that are being difficult and can't give you this information on a breakdown. Does that make sense?
It does. So I can use only option 1 and I don't have to use option 2.
Right, yeah,
Correct.
you can use one or the other. So like
Okay.
if you call, let's say you call Citizens Gas and they are way easier to get the top information from versus the bottom information, but then you call Town of Darlington and they are way easier at just giving you the flat out amounts, then you can use section 2, but you don't have to use, you can either use your top calculation or use one or the other for these. So these are all 3 separate ways to find it.
Okay. I do see it says CS rep, but I don't see a name of vendor.
Okay, so
do you?
my thought process of this when I originally made it was that you're still going to fill out this section right here
Okay.
and then just skip down if you decided that you'd rather call them instead of doing the calculation.
Okay.
So yeah, my thought process with this was going to be like for Indiana American Water, where they were being difficult about giving you a bill breakdown. But then once they gave a bill breakdown, you realize that they don't have any unallowable charges. So it was just more of if they gave you like a delinquent notice bill that's not telling you like where each one goes, or if you have a bill where they're saying water and wastewater have to be separated, then this is where that would go, because they obviously have to tell you what the separation is if they're asking you to pay it separately between the two of them. So I was just trying to give another option for maybe people that don't really like the calculation part of it, or didn't really think it made sense. So
And keep in mind, you don't, like, if you have a bill that just totally makes sense, you don't have to contact the vendor at all. I think that has been to some LSPs has been a misconception, because I've noticed on some where the bill's very straightforward, that you don't need to contact the vendor at all, that some of you are contacting the vendor. I mean, not necessarily you, but maybe your intake staff are contacting the vendor, um, when it's very clear on the bill that of what you can and can't pay. So the vendor doesn't always have to be contacted. You can use whatever bill you have and just take out, take out the trash, which I always have to say after I say that, no pun intended. But take out the unallowable parts without contacting the vendor, or utilize the tool. The payment plans are also really good. This kind of was developed based on issues we were having with payment plans. And those are, speaking of, that's something that I wanted to bring up too, because I know many of you are dealing with the payment plans. They also may be called installment plans. I don't know. There's several different names for that too. So I wanted to bring that one up because several of you have had questions about the payment plans. So just know that we can cover payment plans. We can pay the past due balances on those. But her tool is a very good one for that as well. So, all right. It is now 3:15. Are there any questions about what we've covered today? I think overall, you all are doing a fantastic job with a brand new program that we're all learning about. I don't think anything that we saw was anything that was unfixable, or anything that is, so terrible that it's going to be hard to recoup from. I think they're all easy and great learning experience that you all can have takeaways from this. But yeah, Rosa, go ahead.
Sorry. I do have a question.
Sure.
I noticed on that email you sent with all the attachments, if the vendor decides that they have to break it up per claim, which I had one vendor ask me, and that's the vendor that I'm having to go back and do all her claims as a double vendor. I mean, not a double vendor, I'm sorry, a double claim. I noticed the claim doesn't show whether it's water or wastewater. Is it okay that in an email I let the vendor know that we're breaking the payment or the benefit in half for water and half for wastewater, because I technically don't know what is what behind on either of them. So if my past due that I can give is $125, I'm just splitting that in half and applying 75 to water and 75 to wastewater, because I don't technically know what is behind on either of them.
Well, and technically, if it's going to the same vendor, you don't even need to do that.
Okay, but if they can I send them an email if they're still requesting me to break it up?
Oh, they are.
Yeah,
As in
because
the vendor.
that's just kind of a lot of extra work
Yeah.
on us. And I mean, I don't mean to complain, but I thought the transmittal was going to separate water and wastewater in the actual wording. So technically, they don't even know which one goes to what. So
Yeah,
just kind of confirming with them that, yeah, I'm gonna send 125, but they don't, based on the transmittal, they don't know if it's for water or wastewater, because it's just two claims under LIWAP.
Right. Yeah, especially since it's the same, that's kind of odd that it's not like they gave us 2 different bank accounts either. But yeah, you can tell them we don't have it. If they don't break it down, how are we supposed to?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Am I okay with just letting them know with an email, half goes to water and half goes to wastewater, instead of sending 2 different claims for the same person under the same account number?
Yeah, Tom, if in Eve Connect, if you click the no, never mind. That won't work either. I was gonna say if you click that button that says break it down based on funding source, but that or there's a checkbox for something similar to that, but that would only be breaking it up between like LIWAP and EAP. It wouldn't break it down between, yeah. Yeah, I mean, go ahead.
What vendor is it that you're looking at?
Hammond
Hammond?
Water. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And they're not breaking down their own charges at all on the bill, or?
On the bill, it is. It
Okay.
is broken down.
Okay.
But we didn't know the past due.
Okay.
The
That
past due
makes-
is not broken down, just the current.
Okay.
That's why I like that worksheet, because now I can break up my own.
Mm-hmm.
But when I first sent that transmittal, she asked me, well, how much goes to where? What goes to water and what goes to wastewater? And I'm like, well, I really don't know what to tell you, because
That's kind of crazy though. Even if because if they're sending it and their own bill, like what would they do when they get the payment from the customer?
yeah, so that's why I'm like, I don't know. And I
Yeah,
thought that when I broke up the claims, it was going to tell me water and wastewater, because that's how it breaks it up in EAP Connect. But when I did the actual transmittal, it just says LIWAP. It
right,
doesn't say water or wastewater.
right.
So kind of just to make it easy on myself, and I'm kind of thinking that there's going to be another vendor with that same issue. I have not talked to that vendor, but with that second vendor, I did break it up for them. So I will have to verify with them if I can do just one.
Yeah,
I will talk to them again, see if I can, if just making one claim and letting them know that half goes to one and half goes to the other, instead of me creating 2 different claims. And that way they already know in the back end to make that split.
right. Yeah.
Okay, sorry. I was trying to find like one of the Hammond water bills so that I could at least look at what you're looking at. So I get what you mean. The previous balance is stated, but it doesn't say, like, the charges are broken down for the current charges, but not for the previous balance.
Right.
So basically, in that instance, if you, because the worksheet is going to take out all of the sanitary, or this is the bill you're talking about that says sanitary instead of. All right. Okay.
Yes.
So they have a base water. So the base water is $3, which means that if you send her a bill for the previous balance or a transmittal for the previous balance, and that water is always $3, if she's looking at the bill and it was past due, I'm hoping that she would split that up accordingly based on what she sees. Like, that's the problem. These look like standard charges, so hopefully she'd be able to figure out the math on that herself, right?
I think she wants us to do the math.
Right. So, let me look at some of these Hammond bills and let me see if the standard charges are all the same, and then I will get back to you on those.
Yeah, we'll take that one offline so we can, since it's a kind of one-off, we'll move on here.
But I do see like what you're talking about. But yeah.
All right. Julie is asking if you could run through an example using the worksheet, so that they can make sure they're sure to use it. sure they know how to use it. Does anyone, because I can do this because I don't know how short or how long we're running on time. Does anyone have questions? Because what we could do is kind of like wrap up any other questions we have, and then those that want to stay to see the walkthrough of the example can, and those that would like to jump off can.
This is Julie. I think Leah running through that bottom part was helpful.
Okay.
And if I have additional questions, I can reach out to you all then.
Okay.
Thanks, guys.
Oh, sure. Okay. All right. Any other questions then? All right. Well, if you think of any as you're processing this all, don't hesitate to contact us. You have our email addresses and Leah's if it's specific to monitoring. Thank you so much for taking the extended time to let us go through all of this with you. I hope that it helps, and we'll get all of the slides to you. And then obviously this is recorded as well, and I'll go ahead and stop the recording and I'll just let it go. But yeah, if you have any questions, let us know. Again, I think you all are doing a wonderful job. I know it's been difficult. This is a new program. It's going to be difficult for everyone, but I mean, I think given that it is so new, I don't think we saw anything, like I said, that was so big that we can't fix things and move forward. So I appreciate all your hard work, and I know we're just going to continue to make things better, and this program is just going to keep running more and more smooth, and next year is just going to be a breeze. We can just keep our fingers crossed. So same thing with the vendors. If you have any vendors that we need to be in contact with, please keep sending them our way. That's probably our biggest thing right now too, that we are, keep trying to keep ahead on. Tom, did you have anything else that you wanted to say? All right. Well, if not, then let's see, when's our next one? 2 weeks. What's that date? We will see you all again on Tuesday, April 5th. So have a good rest of your week. Thanks, everyone.
Am I still doing a walk?